Hey manufacturing world, welcome to a special episode of Shop Matters sponsored by Okuma America. Today we're going to talk about something completely different, completely off topic of what we typically do. Normally we're talking about machine shops and manufacturing and machine tools and things like that. Today we're going to talk about all things barbecue related. So yeah, something completely different. But I was talking to Chris the other day, we were out here on the floor together and thought, we just got done with the open house. We just did a grill giveaway for the open house event that we did here at Okuma. And I don't know, just the thought hit my head of while we got the grill here, let's sit down and chat and talk barbecue for a little bit, something a little different. So for the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to spend a little time talking about what we do outside of Okuma. So joining me today is my buddy Chris Kozel from Mastercam. Welcome, Chris.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yeah, so I couldn't think of anybody better to sit down and do this podcast with. He and I have cooked a lot of barbecue together over last several years now. So we had the opportunity. I got called by our local high school to cook for a football event. It was a tailgating kind of football competition. It was one of the football jamborees, the opening football game. And they wanted each football team that was coming to the jamboree to field a barbecue team to compete with barbecue. So I knew as soon as I realized it wasn't all the fathers from the football team coming to cook, it was just going to be me. I reached out to Chris real quick and another friend of mine said, hey, I got to pull together a quick cooking team to do a competition, and you jumped in and joined me. So we've done a lot together here over the last couple of years, cooking between the football event, which we won, by the way. We'll talk about that here in a minute. And then cooking for employees. We've had the opportunity. We do a lot of times at the beginning of the year or shortly after the holidays, we'll cook for our AE group or people that we do a lot of work with over the course of the year. And Chris is always one that jumps in. Either you host the event and I'm helping you, or I'm doing something and he's helping me. So together we spend a lot of time on the grills.
Yeah, it's a great way to give back to everybody too. It's amazing how many people you start talking to, whether it be customers, partners, employees, that you start talking to about, barbecuing, and everyone kind of has their own version of what barbecuing truly is.
Right.
But it's interesting to talk with different people and find out their different techniques.
Yeah. So I grew up in Missouri, so I kind of grew up what I consider the heart of barbecue country. And now I know when you talk to Texas or North Carolina, they're going to argue with me on that. But you're from Chicago. How did you get involved in cooking and grilling and barbecuing?
Well, it actually kind of started off with my dad. He was, my dad was always the grill guy. My mom was the one that kind of worked in the kitchen. But my dad was the one that kind of really taught me about how to cook on a gas grill. And it wasn't until later in life, probably, my 30s, that I started experimenting with smokers and joined in with my dad, and we kind of played around with it, and I just kind of been growing ever since.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
What kind of grill do you like cooking with the most?
Oh, geez. So my favorite grill to cook on is really, the Kamado style.
Okay.
It really kind of comes down, to what I like in flavor, and everyone has their different opinions, but to me, Kamado's the way to go. What do you like?
So I kind of grew up cooking on offsets.
Okay.
So that's where you have something kind of similar to this. You have the horizontal cooking chamber, and then to the side you have an offset firebox. So the grill that my dad had when I was growing up was a little offset style cooker. Some of my first barbecue grills were grills like that, either a Weber, charcoal Weber grill, or an offset. So I kind of cut my teeth on offsets. So if I have enough time and stamina to stay up all night and tend the fire, which used to be fun. That used to be the joy for me of cooking barbecue, was staying up all night, having your friends kind of hang out and tending the fire all through the night. I prefer a stick burner because there's just something about cooking with full logs of wood and getting a good base of coal going that, is, to me, always delivered a lot more flavor that way than what I can get out of other methods. But I currently own a Kamado egg, similar to you, and then I've got a Pit Boss pellet grill as well. And between the two, I prefer the Kamado. I can, with 2 chimneys of lump coal, I can cook for about 22 hours on it and never have to touch a thing. So now that I'm a little bit older and I like my sleep at night, I can load that Kamado up with meat, once I get my airflow set the way I want it, shut the lid, go to bed, get a full 8 hours sleep, come back out and do whatever I need to. But ease of use it's hard to beat a pellet grill.
I was just going to kind of comment on that because, I started off, first with kind of a propane, stack build, a stack smoker that I started off, and that was fairly easy, but man, it just seemed like, once I went into like a Kamado or even cooking on an offset, it's kind of a learning curve compared to going on a pellet smoker. Did you kind of find the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. The pellet grill, you come out, it's really like cooking on an oven. Once if you know what you want to do with your meat, you know how to season it the way you want to, set your temperature, and it's really like cooking on an oven. The Kamado, it took me a little bit to learn how to get my airflow going the way I wanted to, how to control certain hot spots. Once I got that figured out, then that was a piece of cake. For me, the artwork really comes in from a fire tending standpoint is when you get into the bigger offsets, and when I got a 2-foot firebox and a 5-foot cooking chamber that I'm trying to maintain constant temperatures through. That to me was a lot more art because you're kind of combining science with art. You're combining the science of cooking temperatures and airflow for your fire with the artwork of how do you get your fire and your coals the way you want it. How do you look and be able to read the smoke coming out on an offset to know that you're burning clean. Anytime you see somebody shut the damper on the exhaust, I cringe because I don't know if you knew this, but I cooked for a lot of years. We had a barbecue competition team, and we'd walk around. You see the guys who you know every event that's there, and then you see certain people that you hadn't seen before, and they're choking their dampers the wrong way, and they're getting all that stale smoke in the cooking area, and that translates to the flavor of the meat that you're getting out, what your finished product is going to be. So learning kind of the artwork of being able to control your fire, to me, was where a lot of the fun came in at.
So let me get this straight. You actually competed in the barbecue circuit?
Yeah, the Kansas City Barbecue Society, KCBS. That was the type of competition that I really gravitated towards because it was all blind judging. So it wasn't on-site showmanship. You cooked, you had a box that you had to prepare, you had 6 judges that you had to cook for, so you had to have 6 individual cuts of whatever your category was that you were competing in. But it was all blind judging, so your team got a number, and then when you were given your box, you had your team number that went on the box. But then when we did our turn-in, that number got shuffled and a new number got in place, so by the time it hit the judges' table, they didn't know what the original number was that got set out. So tries to really even the playing field out, and you really judge on the content of your meat, of your barbecue at that point. So it was a lot of fun. It started out just a ton of fun. I grew up rodeoing, and there for a while in my adulthood, when I stopped rodeoing, got too old and beat up for that. I went for many years where I didn't really have much of a hobby that I really sunk my teeth into, so to speak. No, somewhat pun intended. But showing up at these barbecue cook-offs, that was about the same energy as showing up at a rodeo. I come rolling in with my truck, my trailer, and full of equipment, ready to compete and win some money. And that was the same kind of juice that you had when you were rodeoing. So it was a good transition for me, and just I loved it. Spent every weekend we were either competing or we were catering weddings and different events to make money because competitions were expensive. Even this was back in the early 2000s, and it would cost us $800 to $1,200 for every competition that we went to. And we were poor family, bootstrapped, just trying to make it happen, and built all my own equipment. So I had a 24-foot trailer that I wound up making myself, and that was a lot of fun too, showing up at these competitions with equipment that you made yourself, competing against the big guys that had big rotisseries or commercial type equipment and were much more well funded. It was good to go and clean their clocks and come home with their money. So,
well, it's good that you were in the manufacturing industry and you kind of had that background of being able to tinker with stuff. I know you and I have talked about that in the past about what kind of draws people in to start getting into barbecue. And I know for myself, I loved working with my hands ever since I was a kid. My dad probably, was so mad at me because I took all of his tools, and of course now he pays me back. Half my tools are missing now, and I got to call him up and say, "What did you do with my tools?" But going back, that's I think what kind of drew me into barbecuing is because a lot of it is, experimenting, doing different things to your hands, and like you know, building your own equipment. I mean, if you didn't have this, background, you'd have to go out and spend, thousands of dollars on getting some of this barbecue stuff.
Right. And it was never a second thought for me. When I decided that I wanted to build my own trailer, I looked at a lot of different cookers that were available on the market, most of which I couldn't afford at the time. So I knew if I was going to have it, I had to make it myself. But I had enough confidence in my skill set. I can weld, I can cut, I can grind, I can do whatever I need to do. So I'd never built a trailer before, but it didn't take me long at all. In about a month and a half, I had a 24-foot trailer built with storage on the front end of the trailer where all of my cooking equipment went in, all my tables, my tents, and all that. And then I had two 5-foot by 4-foot barbecue pits mounted side by side on the back end of it with 2-foot offset fireboxes hanging off the back end of it. And it was a heck of a rig. It was a lot of fun. So I had one set up to do whole hog cooking. Then I had another one set up for more your Boston butts and briskets and ribs. So I had shelves and racks that used up a little more space. But then I had one that was just had one shelf where I could put whole hogs on and flip them and do all that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun. But to your point, the tinkering, I think that's all of us. When you look at machinists and people that are in manufacturing, most people are tinkerers by nature. Yeah. Either tinkering with hot rods or motorcycles or cooking or barbecuing, things like that. So it was just a really good fit for me, and then of course I love barbecue, so what better way to do it, right?
Yeah. And I'll tell you, I got introduced with you doing the competition when we went and did the competition at the high school.
Yeah.
What a great event. I mean, we started off being able to cook for the whole football team.
Yeah.
It was a lot of work. I mean, we stayed up, basically all night cooking Boston butts and
right.
To feed the kids and get the feedback from them where, they really liked the barbecue, and then to come off and start, let's compete.
Right.
And that was a whole new different scenario for me. I mean, it was a high and a feeling that you just can't describe in words to be able to compete like that. And there was 6 other teams? Yeah, there were 6 other teams that we competed against. I mean, what a great time that was.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And that was on-site cooking, which you're sitting there staring your judges in the face while they're tasting your stuff, and that's a whole different environment too. You feel confident about what you do and how you cook, but it's a different scenario when all of a sudden you're faced with. And on that one, I think there was about 8 people, if I remember right, judging us. And, but I felt pretty good when they went to other tents or other tables and then came back to ours for seconds and thirds. I knew we were in a pretty good spot at that point.
Yeah, I agree with you. The other thing that kind of caught me too is the presentation.
Yeah.
We talk about, machining and stuff and, the way a part looks, or when you go buy a product in, the store and you look at presentation. You had such a knack in looking at, how we set stuff. I'm throwing stuff on the table, and you're like, oh, wait, we got to kind of set this here. I mean, it kind of brought it to another aspect of, if I ever did want to start competing like that, some of the detail that you have to kind of pay attention to.
Sure. And that's something that's different with the Kansas City Barbecue Society cooking. When you are turning in your trays, you can only have green leaf lettuce or common curly parsley in the box, or at least back then it was, back when I was competing. And that, again, kind of limited what you could do from a decoration flair.
Yeah.
But even at that, it's pretty interesting how creative you can be on making a styrofoam box look beautiful with how you frame that's the way I typically did mine, is I'd lay down a bed of lettuce, lay my meat in, and then I would frame around it and fill in gaps with my parsley and things like that. But you go from that to an on-site type judging where your entire table, your entire spread has to look neat. And I remember leading up that week when we were going to do that competition, I don't have any of my competition stuff. Over the years, I've got rid of most of that. So I'm scrambling through just trying to find what items can we use to turn this into a neat presentation. And at the end of the day, it turned out pretty neat. So I'll have to see for the B-roll footage for some of this. I'll pull up some of these pictures and see if Annette can incorporate that into our video here on this. But we're going to be cooking whole hog for upcoming Okuma event. So this is top secret, but by the time this video rolls out, I know we will have already done this event, so I can talk to the camera on this. But we're going to cook for all the employees. I've got Chris here roped into helping me again, but we're going to do a whole hog on that one. Our president wants to have that, thinks it'd be a fun environment. But I know one hog's not going to feed, the hundreds of people that we have here at Okuma. So we're going to cook individual Boston butts. So what we plan on doing is we're going to cook the whole hog, and then we're going to cook Boston butts separately. We're going to pull all that meat. We're going to lay it kind of in the cavity of the hog, and then have people come by and pull it out of that, as they make their trays. So
yeah, that'll be a good time.
Even that, it's a neat presentation on how we can pull it together and do something kind of unique. And again, it's fun. It's fun to do something when you're giving back to the company and to the employees and family and friends and things like that. So
it's a great way to talk with people and all that.
Yeah.
I have a question for you that
Okay.
I always kind of find fascinating when you talk to people that are barbecuing.
Mm-hmm.
Who is kind of like your idol when you think of barbecue? Who do you kind of pull your inspiration from or ideas from that kind of fits your style?
So that's a really good question. And early on, what really turned me on to barbecue when I was real little was a place called Nash's Hickory Pit. That was in Gravois Mills, Missouri. It's no longer there. It's been gone a long time now. But it was this really cool, kind of a hillbilly themed, very touristy kind of themed barbecue place, and they cooked everything in the open in the middle of the restaurant. So you walked in, you could smell it, and then you could see everything being cooked. So that kind of set the bug, if you will.
Okay.
And then I just started cooking on my own, kind of figuring things out. Coming from Missouri, I have a natural kind of instinct. I like the molasses, kind of a tomato-based sauce, sweeter type barbecue. But then when I moved to South Carolina in the early 90s, that's when all of a sudden I got introduced to vinegar sauce and mustard sauce and Alabama white sauce, which now, because some of the restaurants carry it, back in the 90s, nobody outside of Alabama really heard of Alabama white sauce.
Yeah.
But I worked with people and lived around people in Charleston, South Carolina, that just influenced a whole different type of flavor. So when I started initially competing, my barbecue that I put out was a little bit of a blend between a vinegar and a molasses style barbecue sauce. So it was kind of a different concoction. My rubs were always super spicy, but then I had a real sweet sauce that went with it. So I just kind of developed my own style, if you will. But somebody that I learned to look up to very quickly when I got into the competition circles, there's a team called Willie T's. I became really good friends with the pitmaster, the guy that owned and ran that team. One of the best cooks I've probably ever met in my life. The guy was just absolutely incredible. He's in Gaffney, South Carolina. But he was big into like butter sauces and things like that. So a lot of his barbecue sauce and any type of a finishing sauce that he put on chicken and ribs and things had a lot of butter in it. And all of a sudden, that kind of introduced a little different flavor to me, because here I like kind of a sweet, spicy, and then I try Willie T's stuff, and it's got this little buttery flavor to it that I really liked. So, but when I look, everything that guy ever cooked was just amazing.
Really?
So all of a sudden, even though we're competitors, that's somebody that I really looked up to and tried to emulate a lot of his style and what he did, how he competed, how he did his turn-ins and things like that. So then over the years, we just became friends, and still stay in touch with him. And, that's been 20 years ago now, and still talk to him, regularly, just outside of cooking and barbecue and things like that. So
Yeah, that's really awesome.
Yeah.
how about you?
Well, me being kind of a newer guy to barbecuing, obviously, guy on TV, I mean, he really kind of introduced me to some of the different barbecuing techniques and some of the competitors he had. But, really, Matt Pittman, Meat Church, I love Texas barbecue. To me, there's nothing any better. My wife is going to hate me for saying that, because she's, born and raised down here in the Carolinas, and we got two different opinions. But Matt's done a great job of putting out some really good videos, really good recipes, really good rubs. I like making my own rubs. I don't know, do you do the same?
I did, yeah. Especially when we were competing, I made all my own rubs that way. Nowadays, I'm just cooking around the house. A lot of times I'm using store-bought stuff, and most of the time I doctor it up. But my days of having cabinets, back when I was competing, I had 3 kitchen cabinets just full of spices that I kept fresh and kept rotated out. Because every week, we were making big 5-gallon buckets basically of rub, and those days are behind me now. But I still like doctoring them up and messing with them.
Well, another person, if you ever get a chance to look up, is Susie Bullock. She runs a website. Actually, she used to write all the stuff, all the recipes for Traeger.
Yeah.
She kind of went on her own, and now she offers, online where you can go on there, you can buy her stuff, or she gives you actually all the recipes for everything she cooks.
Okay.
And what I found is, taking a recipe, taking some of the stuff like, you were talking about, and just, again, tinkering with the flavors, getting stuff the kind of the way I like it. And especially when you start talking about competing, or what I'm finding out is cooking for different people, everyone has kind of a little different palette of what they like.
Right.
Like my wife, when I talk about steak, because steak is like the holy grail. You talk to anybody when you mention barbecue, steak, how do you like your steak? My wife, salt, pepper. I'm like, no garlic powder? Nope, salt, pepper, that's it.
Yep.
And I'm just like, So, when you start talking about barbecue, do you ever kind of play around with, other things other than, like a grill? Do you do anything with like a sous vide?
I don't do sous vide. I do a lot of Dutch oven cooking.
Okay.
I actually, so as you're talking about like other cooking influencers, if you will, Kent Rollins is a cowboy cook, out of Oklahoma. Love his stuff. He was a Justin Wilson fan, so you can trace a lot of the stuff back. But I love cooking on Dutch ovens, so I do a lot of that camp style cooking. I like making breads. To me, there's nothing better than making fresh homemade bread in a Dutch oven, and then using pulled pork or any kind of meat that you're cooking, and then combining that at an event or anything. So
yeah, there is nothing better than a focaccia bread made on the smoker. I'll tell you, that is some of the best
I've never
bread.
done that. So yeah, I've always done them in Dutch ovens. I've never actually done it on the cooker itself. But
my wife thought I was crazy. COVID started, and everyone kind of got locked down, and that really kind of kicked off my whole cooking thing. So I started doing a lot of stuff on the grill, and she had to throw down the gauntlet. I think she actually planned this on me, because she came in and she was like, well, yeah, you are really good on the pellet smoker and barbecuing, but she's like, you're kind of a one-trick pony. It's about all you got. And I was like, oh, there it goes. So I started really getting into looking at different ways on how I can cook on the inside stuff and using some of the other different techniques. I use the sous vide, cooking with water. Kind of at first I was like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And, it really is an easy way to get the meat temperature perfect. If you think about a steak, I mean, we all like to have a steak a certain way.
Yeah.
Using a sous vide, you can't mess that up.
Right.
It always cooks to one temperature all the way through. You set your temperature. You can't really blow it. And then, basically what I like doing is, taking a steak off the sous vide, take it out. I'll tell you my trade secret. Put it in a cast iron skillet, and you add duck fat. And then as you're searing on your side, you keep kind of just basting that duck fat over the top of that steak.
Nice.
A little bit of rosemary.
Okay.
Good Lord, is that some really good steak.
Yeah. Oh, that sounds great.
I love a good steak, and that's one of the reasons that I got the Kamado is for the heat to do steaks on. My offset and my pellet grill, things like that. I know everybody advertises that you can do a good steak on pellet grills. I argue that you can't. At least for me, my taste and what I like in a good steak, I've never been able to get it seared up the way I want on a pellet grill.
Yeah.
But I do similar to you, only I do it on the Kamado. But I'll hit some butter. I get my cast iron in there and get it screaming hot, and then I throw some garlic butter and then throw my steak in there. I like to slow cook my steak for a little bit on either offset or a pellet grill, something like that. But then I always finish it on that Kamado, and I get it screaming hot. I get it up, 1,000 to 1,100 degrees. I will absolutely peg my temperature gauge and throw that cast iron in there and get it really hot, and then I sear it, just a couple of seconds on each side at that temperature, and you get just a nice crust on it. But to me, you can't go to a steakhouse and get it that good most times. So.
Yep.
Yeah, and even talking about, you and I, talked about potatoes,
Yeah.
What's your ultimate potato you would make?
So I'm a simple guy. I grew up, my dad was a meat and potatoes guy, and so every meal was meat and potato of some flavor.
Yep.
I like just a good baked potato, olive oil all around it, rolled in some kosher salt or some coarse salt, and then put it on the smoker and cook it up till it's about 200, 205. Get it nice and tender, and then I like that with nothing but butter. So I'm a very plain person when it comes to potatoes. I like my meat to have a lot of salt, a lot of flavor to it. My potato, I just want soft with some butter. How about you?
Man, for me, the ultimate is not a twice baked, but I would say a scallop potatoes that I made recently. I had some family coming to town. So basically what I did, took a cast iron skillet and I did a spiral roll of bacon.
Oh, yeah.
So about 1.5 pounds of bacon I laid down, put all my potatoes in there, added a little bit of garlic in there, and then what I also put in there was Swiss Gruyere cheese, and then I folded the bacon back in itself, put it on my smoker. I think I let it roll for about 2 hours, 3 hours on there. Good.
Nice.
One, the presentation on it was just excellent. And a lot of people are like, how are you going to get that out of the pan? Believe it or not, it wasn't too bad. Go underneath there with a spatula, pull it out. But I mean, just having that twice bake, all the cheese in there, and the smoke flavor and the bacon. I mean, who doesn't love bacon?
Right.
That's probably my all-time favorite to go to. It's just a little bit of work.
Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. I do like scalloped potatoes. I cook those in a Dutch oven a good bit.
Yep.
I like using the end pieces. A lot of times, around here especially, you kind of have to go to a butcher to get it. But on bacon, instead of the strips, the end pieces are usually thicker, just really nice meaty pieces. I'll put those down on the bottom and then layer potatoes, cheese. I like garlic in about everything that I cook. So, and then a little bit of cream. Mix all that together and put it in the Dutch oven. Throw some coals under it and on top of it and let it roll for a while I'm cooking something on the grill. So
you're making me hungry.
Yeah.
Doesn't take much, but you're making me hungry.
And it's in the afternoon too, so we'll be just in time for dinner. We get done talking about this. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, something we did for the football event, we did some Mexican street corn.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. That's something that I really got into here about a year ago or so, and I get to where I like cutting it off the cob actually better. I'll cook it on the cob, grill everything up, but then to serve it, I like to cut it all off the cob. And I got to think back. Is that what we did during the event?
Yes, we did.
Okay, I couldn't remember exactly how we presented
I
it.
actually made it that way after that because I was doing either can or just buying the bag corn. And then when I saw you do that, I was like, oh my god! And then tasted it. It just really did have a nice flavor to it that I liked a lot.
Char in the corn.
Oh god, yeah. The other part of doing it at the competition was those burnt ends, pork belly burnt ends.
Yeah, and growing up in Missouri, burnt ends, that's always the points of brisket that you're cutting off. And when people first started talking about pork belly burnt ends, I'm like, that just sounds like blasphemy to me. But yeah, those were awesome. That was a great time. So kind of going back somewhat engineering and things like that. You remember how we had to make all the burnt ends fit on the Kamado? So I bought those racks. So anybody that doesn't cook on a Kamado, they're about the size of like a Weber grill and fairly small. So I bought these wire racks thinking that we'd be able to stack them up or put them on a pellet grill, things like that. Well, once we got everything going, we realized we're gonna have to do the burnt ends on the Kamado grill. So all of a sudden we realized one of these little wire racks I had ate up the whole basically bottom of that Kamado. So we're sitting there kind of scratching our heads like, how are we gonna do anything with this? I asked Chris to roll me up some rolls of tinfoil about the size of a baseball, and I put 5 of them, one on each corner, one in the middle, and we put another rack and some burnt ends on top of that. Put more balls of tinfoil on, and we just stacked them up inside that Kamado egg, and then shut the lid and let it roll for an hour and a half.
I'm kind of glad you came over there and helped me because I had to be just looking silly standing there just staring at it going, how am I going to do this? That's a good idea.
We did something else. What was it? It was the ribs, wasn't it? We had a rack of ribs that wouldn't fit.
Yeah.
So one of the Kamados we had a shelf on the, like your bottom, if you will. Then it had a smaller diameter shelf up at the top. And the racks of ribs that we had were way too long. It was full racks, obviously, and they were way too long for the shelf. And Chris was sitting there looking at it going, how in the world are we going to do this?
Yeah.
And I basically did the same thing. I took tinfoil, rolled it up, and made 2 horseshoes, and we just extended the rack using tinfoil and was able to put the ribs up on that top shelf and worked out perfect. So things that you engineer in a pinch when you need to get through a tough situation. Right?
That's sometimes what you got to do.
Yep.
No
different than out here on machines, right?
No, it sure isn't.
Yep. Very cool. Well, Chris, I appreciate you joining me today and
talking shop.
This, and I think I touched on it, at the beginning when we first started talking, but we did the Okuma open house in March, and our marketing team said, hey, let's do something fun, have a little giveaway.
Yeah.
And we came up with the idea of let's buy a grill, do a little a drawing, and give the grill away. We had a customer that wound up winning it, so it's getting ready to ship out. We're going to put it on a skid tomorrow and get it shipped out to the customer. But all of our partners went through and they donated gift cards, and everything was somewhat grill themed. Some of our partners brought in like Yeti style coolers, and other ones had these barbecue baskets that had chimneys and gloves and just different cooking utensils and things like that. So
Everything a barbecue guy needs.
yeah, at the end of the day, I think we wound up with about $6,000 worth of giveaways that all of our partner companies donated during the open house. So we had customers from all over the country coming in, winning little gift cards and steak cards and things like that. So it really just tied the whole barbecue theme together really nicely. So I appreciate everybody's involvement in that.
Yeah, and what an event. I mean, I'll tell you, being out on that floor and seeing how packed it was, especially, coming into 2023, it was a really great show.
When we first started planning it, we were all a little bit nervous we hadn't had an open house for almost 3 years, or probably actually over 3 years. So one, we were all a little rusty at the game trying to do it again. But then two, we had to figure out the logistics, because all of a sudden our head count really shot through the roof, and it was a great thing. We were glad to do it.
Yeah.
And fortunately, everything rolled smoothly. I couldn't believe once it all came together. You fight for months, kind of working through everything, and then opening day, you just hope everything goes smooth, and it did. It was really a great team effort from everybody involved. So
Yeah, great job.
yeah, hey, thank you guys. It's one thing Okuma, we're here. It's our building, our machines, and things like that. But it's our partner companies and the work that we do together that actually pulls it all off in the end. So really appreciate it.
Yeah, anytime. Always glad to help.
All right.
And barbecuing.
And barbecuing, that's right. Well, thank you for joining us. And next podcast, I promise we'll get back to talking chip making and things like that. We just thought this would be a little fun to talk something different and kind of what Chris and I do outside of the office, so to speak. So
Absolutely.
all right. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.
Take care.